Hello, 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 hi. I am drawing again, like usual. When was the last time I did a game stream? I don't know. I don't know why I keep doing drawing streams, but we out here. Yeah, I'm drawing OC stuff. Um, the one in the foreground here, you can only barely see my cursor for. This is Gossamer, and this is Edelweiss. And this is some random little baby dragon. That's what I'm doing today. I guess new outfit too, I guess? I don't know. Male Fox. Male Fox returns. It's been a minute since we've had a Male Fox. I think it's been over a year. But yeah. So, I have some neat new things. New screens and stuff. They're quite nice. Put a surprising amount of effort in them, and at the same time they were kind of vaguely rushed. I don't know. They took about as much time as they took, you know? But yeah, so I very quickly sketched this before starting. Well, it wasn't quick, it took a couple of hours. It took at least an hour. An hour and a half, probably. I don't know. But yeah. So I'm just gonna start cleaning up, because that was kind of the point. I just wanted to get a quick stream in at some point. I was tempted to just play Baldur's Gate by myself today, but I was like, no. No. You gotta stream. Come on now. So, here we are. Yeah. I'm also starting slightly early. By like half an hour, just because my flatmate also intends to stream this evening. And pretty much every other day this week, because they're doing a little doodle-thon thing. And I don't think our internet can handle both of us right now, and it doesn't get switched until the 24th. So yeah, I wanted to try and not overlap too much. Like a little bit of overlap is fine. But like I didn't want to be streaming until like 1 or 2 a.m. when they plan on starting streaming at midnight. So yeah, I figured I'd start a little bit early. I would have liked to start a little earlier, but sketch took time. And I didn't really want to sketch on stream, because I find that makes it harder sometimes. I start getting very nervous. You know, I start getting nervous about what my sketches look like. Even though like I like my finished sketches, but like the process of them, I don't know. I've always had a hang up about showing it. I don't know, I mean, I show them during like time lapses, but that's like super sped up. You don't get to see all of my indecisiveness. My 80 different attempts to sketch the same fucking thing. I don't know, it's like my thumbnails especially are just like my least confident part of the process, I feel like. So I don't love coming on stream not already knowing what I'm drawing exactly. Personally. It's not my favorite. Yeah, so a little earlier than usual. And I'm probably gonna, if I stream again this week while my flatmate is still doing their doodle-thon, it'll probably also still be earlier. We also don't know if the new internet is gonna be able to handle both of us streaming at the same time. We have to wait like 3 months to upgrade it again after that, which we are planning to. No, we can't immediately get onto fiber, which is annoying. Why are ISPs like this? I don't know, it was like a weird policy thing. Not that we couldn't like immediately go to fiber, but like because we're switching. Something lines from previous ISP? Question mark? Yeah, I mean, didn't come soon enough because we had a complete internet outage the other day, which really fucking sucked. It was like a full 24 hours, and I hated every minute of it. To be honest, it was pretty shit as an experience. 0 out of 10, would not recommend. But yeah, hopefully, won't happen again with the few days we have left on this current internet. I mean, if it does, I think I'd, kill someone. Probably. I'd be fucking pissed, though. I would actually be genuinely very annoyed. It was bad enough the one time. Even though we're literally, like, I think it was especially because we were in the process of switching, and that's when it decided to happen. It was just like, God damn it. But yeah, internet outages suck. You really don't realize, like, how much stuff is reliant on internet until you have an internet outage and you can't access fucking anything. Especially because our flat, because it's made of brick, as many British flats are. Especially because of that, we just straight up don't get data in our flat. It sucks. Sucks so bad. So we literally, like, if we needed emergency access, we'd have to either stand in the kitchen and hope it would, be a little bit stable, somewhat, or we'd have to literally go stand outside and do the exact same thing, but with slightly more success. Still wasn't great. You know, that was a fun experience. That was on Saturday. You know, exciting. Stream one night and then immediately afterwards have a complete outage and not be able to do it again. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Oh yeah, I love Gossamer's little nose. So fun. So fun to draw. Yeah, I'm hoping this music I've got looped at the moment won't start getting overly annoying. Because I didn't get like a collection of music at the same time this time. I just kind of like grabbed this one. It's like, this sounds good. I want this one. But I might switch it eventually if it starts getting a little... Well, I mean, it's an OST, so it shouldn't. Hopefully. You know. Because I thought it sounded nice with my new starting music. It's not my music, it's just an OST, again, from the same game. But you know, consistency. But I thought it sounded very nice and chill. Yeah. I'm also hoping my audio sounds okay. Because I got a new plugin to deal with it during transitions because it just was not functioning properly. OBS was straight up not doing the things OBS was supposed to do. Which is so useful. Because during like a stinger, like, so OBS gives you options for your audio. Yeah, Cello, I was annoyed too. OBS gives you options for your audio during a transition. It's like, oh, you can either crossfade it, or well, you can either fade it in and then out, or you can have it crossfade, so like they'll overlap. And it didn't matter what I put down because it didn't care. It would not transition the audio properly. So I had to get a fucking plugin for it. For some reason, just because OBS couldn't handle like the most basic of tasks. Thanks OBS. So yeah, I had to deal with a plugin the other day while I was working on all my new stuff. And as I got a new stinger, I also have a new break screen and a new ending screen. So that should be fun. I'm quite happy with how they came out. I think you guys will like them too. Yeah, I'm also very anxious about my internet going out again. I keep checking, it's just like, ooh, stay on, don't go anywhere, I need you right now. Please, please, please. But yeah, very fun. Yeah, always hoping for audio to cooperate for once in my life. I always consistently have the most issues with audio, I feel like. Like, across all technological fronts. It seems to be my most consistent, trouble. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I forgot to up the area scaling on this one. There we go. I turned it down because I was working on something, for D&D stuff. Well, not D&D, but tabletop stuff. I had it all the way down to 0 so I could easily fill stuff on the same layer. I always forget to switch it back. Every single time. And then I end up with like stupid little gaps or whatever. And the dog just tried to break into my room again. And he's gonna cry about it. Caesar! I don't think it's picking up on my mic, but... World's most pathetic dog. Swear to God. He does this every time. It's just like, dude, you can hear me. You don't need to be able to check on me all the time, constantly. When will he learn? Never is the answer. He's very stubborn. He's an incredibly stubborn dog. He's just gonna sit there crying for like an age now, I guess. Oh, poor baby. I don't know why he gets so upset over it. The door is just locked. He can still hear me. I know he can still hear me. He genuinely doesn't care like any other time. It's only when I'm, only when I have the door locked that he'll get upset. I can just copy and paste this. If it'll look too weird. No, I think that's fine. Take a little bit of time. Fix it a little bit. Hmm. Why is he crying so loudly? Oh my goodness. Oh, it's just because he can't barge my door open for once. I'm already dehydrated. Wow. Oh my god, when I drink I have ear wiggles. I was just looking over at my YouTube studio. Oh my god. That's good. I like that. Unintentional, but I like it. I mean, if it works, it works, I suppose. Anyway, back to drawing. With the dog still crying directly outside my door. Mm. Don't know why I'm bothering to draw that in its entirety, because there's no point in that. Just extra effort for no reason. Ouch. I banged my elbow off of my bedside table last night, like full force. It hurts so much. I keep like accidentally bleeding on it and then remembering like, oh, you're right, yeah. Generally, like, I hit it so much that I actually thought for a moment that I might have broken it. That's how bad I hurt it. I keep forgetting. Because it only hurts when I actually, like, put weight on it. How goes the stream? Fine so far, I'm just, like, hoping my internet doesn't go out. Honestly, main goal. Yeah. Drawing OCs and stuff. Vibing. My elbow hurts. It's my own fault entirely, but yeah, my internet, or well, my flatmate and I's new internet gets installed on the 24th, I think. But you know, I'm nervous now because we had our whole last internet outage for a full 24 hours, so I'm just like, and I know they plan to stream later tonight, which is why I'm early on the stream today. Because I don't think our current internet could handle both of us streaming at the same time, to be honest. At least, I mean, it might be able to, but I'm not confident in it. So I wanted to stream slightly earlier, and hopefully get this done. And also my dog is crying outside of my door. Incredibly loud. Like, you'd think that he was, like, under genuine distress, but no, he just can't barge my door open because it's locked. God forbid. So now he's gonna camp outside of it and cry. For God knows how long. As per usual. I'm also hoping the background music levels aren't too bad, because I got a plugin to handle transition audio better, because OBS is shit at it. Oh my god. Was not doing like the bare minimum. So I had to get a plugin to do it for me, because I'm not doing that manually. Like, it works, it's set up, it's ready to go. Well, it's actively doing its job. I mean, not at the moment, but it's a little annoying because it sets audio to a percentage of its maximum volume rather than like a specific decibel number, which is so fucking annoying. And I really wish it just let you set it to a decibel. So it'd be so much more manageable. And I cannot edit it while I'm streaming because it will crash OBS. It took so long to set up just because of the fact it kept crashing every time I was trying to edit the macro. pain in the ass. Sounds like a pain. It was a pain. I mean, it's set up, it does what I want. I'm hoping, like, the best I can do to edit background audio levels now in terms of the music is to edit my desktop audio, because I have it set to monitor but not output the audio directly. It goes through my desktop first. So you guys hear it through that instead of the actual, like, what I'm hearing. So hopefully, I'm hoping it's neither too quiet or too loud, because I can really only edit it by so many decibels. Yeah, I really, like, I wish I could get it a bit more precise, rather than having to, like, figure out, like, okay, what's the percentage of the maximum audio? It seems fine? Good. That's ideal. If it's fine, as long as you guys can hear the background music and it's also not overwhelming my voice. I also tried to edit my mic slightly because I realized after stream last time that it sounded kind of tinny for some reason. I don't know if it's any better. It might be, it might not. I could not tell the difference when I was testing it. It's like it sounded borderline the same either way. So it's only once it goes through Twitch that I think it sounds tinny afterwards. I don't know. Audio is like consistently the bane of my streams, I swear to God. Like even when I started, absolutely dog shit fixing audio. So hopefully it's slightly better. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't too bad. It was just like I didn't love it because like, why is it tinny? Don't be tinny. Just be normal. Yeah, so hopefully, it sounds okay. My one hope. I'm also using this outfit for the first time. I made it recently. I started it a while. Oh. Wow. Twitch, thanks for telling me about the ad break before it started. Not. Didn't even fucking bother. It was just like, oh, you have an ad break in progress. Thanks. Thanks, Twitch. Cheers. Could have told me that. Oh my goodness, Caesar! Oh goodness! Oh my god, my flatmate drag Caesar away. I wonder if it would be better to fade the glasses the same way as the other stuff. As the other stuff. Yeah, sure. Wow, that hurt my voice quite a lot. My voice is out of practice a little bit, I think. For speaking for long periods of time. That or like a lymph node is swollen or something. It very well might be. Does it hurt in a very particular spot? I don't know. It'd be like that. Oh, oh. Okay, I think that looks fine. He's just still crying. Oh my goodness. Most abused and neglected dog in the world. No one love him. No one care him. Abandoned when he needed people most. In brackets, the door is locked. The door to a single room in the flat is locked. That's the nice little baby wagon. I can't get this mouth. I'm not sure I like those. Oh my god, how long is Caesar gonna go on for? Good god. This happens like just about every time I actually fully lock my door. Pretty sure. Like, dude, you don't need to have access to me at all times. And he's just like, yes I do. Does he realize I'm not gonna let him in no matter how much he cries? Don't think he does. Any little claw hand things. I'm gonna make him vaguely look like those baby kittens that you just feel like trying to walk, but like they have like no balance, so they're just kind of like flopped halfway down. Also, because they just don't have strength in their legs left. Or any yet, rather. Kind of give it the same stumbly vibe. Tail up. Very important. Yeah, how's Baldur's Gate 3? It's going well. I haven't played it in a couple days. Just 'cause, I don't know. I was busy doing other stuff, I guess. But I got to Act 2. I pretty much only just started Act 2, but I got there. I'm just like taking my sweet time with it for the most part. Trying to get like as much as I can before I do stuff that forces me to move on. Pretty much. But I think I've grabbed most of the party members? I don't know. I think so. I think I've gone most of, if not all of them. I mean, I don't technically have Halsin yet, but like I have him in my camp. I just haven't gotten him to actually bother joining the party yet. Like I was doing. I realized like the other day when I was playing it, that there was like a whole section of the map that I just had not gone to, where the hag is. like completely missed that. I was like, oh shit, I need to there's like a whole side quest chain here that I just straight up missed. Thank God I decided to check back here. I have save scummed some parts. I am a dirty save scummer. I don't save scum when it's like just pure rules, but like decisions I'll save scum if I don't like them. My completionist mentality could never. I mean, I'm trying not to miss anything. Like, not side quests at least. I mean, there's some stuff I'm willing to just skip. Obviously, like, you can't do literally everything in a single playthrough. Obviously. Because choices. I did save scum, because I kind of knew before I did it, I just accidentally took off the plaster. Oopsie. I did, with the hag side quest, I did save scum the eye, because I wanted to, like, I had a feeling that it would give you a special thing, but I wanted to see what it was before I decided to do that. And then I did it and I was like, I don't like that. I'm gonna not get that. I can't, like, I was like, I want to kill her though, so I really don't want that disadvantage. Not that it was necessarily bad, but it was just kind of like, I don't like that. Not for my character, anyway. Because I'm playing a bard, and so what it does, I think, was it gave you like a +1 to intimidation, and then a -1 to perception, and then it gave you disadvantage against attacking hags, and I was like, it's kind of shit. Like, if I was playing a character that mostly used intimidation, like, that would be great. But, like, my party already struggles so much with perceiving things, and I almost never do intimidation with this character. I really need to fix this plaster, oh my god. It's annoying. It was like, I don't use intimidation that often. I use persuasion most of the time, if I'm using any charisma ability. It's like, this is just a disadvantage for me. This does nothing. This gives me nothing. If I was playing like a barbarian or something, it would probably be good. But, or, well, it would probably be okay at least. But, yeah, I was like, good to know, but I'm good, actually. Kinda wish I had done that for, like, the other couple of things you could get in Act 1 like that. But I got too squeamish about the eye thing and made a mistake in my dialogue choices and didn't have a save to redo them for the BDSM god thing. So I just kind of had to suck those ones up. You have some roots pick intimidation choices in games? That's me. See, like, normal D&D, I love doing intimidation things. But, the way I've got my bard, like, he would, in theory, be good at intimidation, because bard. But the whole thing for my bard is, like, they have the charlatan background. It's like, their whole thing is, like, the idea, like, I mean, obviously I can't be that in-depth in the actual game itself, but, like, the idea of my character is, like, before the Nautiloid, kidnapping, whatever majig, that they were a, scam artist, basically, in Baldur's Gate. They're a Baldurian scam artist, and so, and also, like, thief, which I suppose is the same thing in some regard. But mostly scam artists. Like, they're very persuasive. And, like, post-Nautiloid, they're, like, trying to be better, but also, like, they're not that good a person in the first place. But, like, they're not outright evil, they're just kind of a scumbag. Redemption arc. Yeah! It's like, the idea I have for, my character is pretty much just like they've been forcefully taken away and they're kind of taking it as a chance to be like, I could do something else. I could try to help people. So that's what they're doing. But so they're very persuasive because of that background. You know, they do shitty things sometimes, and they're not the most morally sound, and sometimes they can be a dick. Like, they're trying, essentially. It's partially because I don't want to be mean to anyone. I'm trying to be helpful. Anti-hero voice coach. Yeah, they are, yeah. They're kind of playing at being a hero. They're not, like, fully delving into it, but, you know, like, they'll still happily, loot bodies, and they have no issues with, like, just taking someone out for being too annoying. But, like, they're, at least on, like, the major moral, areas, they are trying. So that's kind of like my direction when it comes to dialogue choices. Also, you know, they're a bard. They do bard things. As bards do. They're called just swords, just because I don't know. I like College of Swords more than some of the other default bard subclasses. I was kind of surprised they had it actually, because it is one of the expansion subclasses. But I suppose, like, I don't know, maybe it was just that it came out within development time. So they were like, yeah, we can add this. But I don't know, it's one of the... I'm familiar with it because, like, my actual D&D character is a sword bard. It's like, I already know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing when it comes to it, so I'm, like, I have the action economy down for that subclass already, pretty much. Obviously, like, with Baldur's Gate, there's some differences, like, in the way abilities work. But, like, on the whole, for the most part, like, it follows the same stuff, which is helpful. It makes me feel like I'm actually, like, semi-okay at the game at the gate, which is nice. Purely because I do know how to do action economy. Most of the time. Sometimes I mess it up a little bit. But that's more of like, I find out something that I didn't know at the start. It's like, oh, I should have done that. Well, having access to, like, your entire party's abilities does help a little bit, I think. Especially in D&D, there's, like, a lot of cooperation where it's like, someone might do something that completely throws off your plan for the turn. You cannot always... you can't always predict what's gonna happen with another person's character, and you can't always communicate what you want to do before your turn in D&D. So it's kind of nice in Baldur's Gate to just, like, have full control and be able to have the entire party, like, wholeheartedly do the same thing, or things along the same line. That's quite nice. I like it. As much as I love the chaos from D&D itself when you can't do that, but, like, I like not having to remake an entire plan I had in my head for my turn on the fly right before my turn starts, you know? That's quite a nice part. Through Divinity 2, I think they're the same as BG3. I don't know anything about the Divinity games, so I don't know how similar they are. I do, once I finish with Baldur's Gate 3, I do kind of want to go through Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition, because I got that for free through Prime Games. I know that one is advanced, like I looked into it and it's based on Advanced D&D 2nd edition. And so is the first Baldur's Gate as well. But I don't know anything about AD&D. Like, obviously it's similar, but I don't know what the differences are. I don't know. I don't know how dissimilar 5e is from AD&D 2e. Because I haven't played AD&D 2e. I haven't played any Advanced D&D. I haven't played any D&D editions aside from 5e itself. I've played other kinds of tabletops, but I haven't played any of the Dungeons and Dragons other systems, or older systems. So I don't know much about them. I haven't even played Pathfinder, actually. I know Pathfinder has a lot of overlap, so... And Bash, Mr. Lurkin. That's fine. Hello. Yeah, I don't know, I don't know the differences between AD&D and D&D. So it might be interesting to play that. Like, I have it, I can play it, it's just, I don't know. I'm a little nervous about playing it just because I don't know. But I suppose it would guide me through to some extent. Just like with Baldur's Gate 3, I'm like, well, I know this thing because I already know D&D stuff. Yippee! Like, I don't need an introduction to this. I know what this does. Or like, I know what this does in D&D. Like, it might be slightly different in the actual game, but... or it might be slightly different in Baldur's Gate 3. Sometimes it is different, and I've noticed that with some spells. But like Ice Knife. Ice Knife is one of my favorite spells, like, in general. I love Ice Knife. It's a really good, first level spell. Ice Knife, my beloved. It's very slightly different in Baldur's Gate, simply because, it freezes underneath enemies' feet. So it's like a 5-bit, or well, I don't know how much is in meters. I really struggle with, I don't know why they changed it to meters. It confuses me way more, than if it were just in feet. Even though I live in a country that uses meters over feet for most things, but it confuses me more. It's like I'm so used to D&D being in feet. I'm just like, how much is how big? What? The conversion confuses me. Anyway, but like, it, as far as I'm aware, like, in base game D&D, it doesn't do that. Not that it's a bad thing that it does that in Baldur's Gate 3. It has saved my ass a few times that it does that, but I didn't notice for like the first couple of times I used it. I was like, oh shit, wait, it does that? Oh, that makes it better. 'Cause it's like, oh, I can make difficult terrain. So it's actually like, bro, meters are so good for visual games. I mean, here's the thing, most games, I'm fine with it being in meters. I'm completely fine with it being in meters in most games. It's just because D&D as a system uses feet. So, like, I'm trying to cross-reference things in my head where it's like, I know in D&D that for like, this spell functions in this radius in feet. And it completely throws me off by writing it in meters. I'm like, I don't know how much that is. Is that the same? I don't know. It's like, I know by default that this spell goes 30 feet in D&D, and it's like 18 meters. I'm like, huh? Believe it or not, Warhammer 40k, a game made by the British, primarily uses feet such as this. See, I feel like it's really common to use feet in tabletops, just because it's like, it's smaller than a meter, so it's a bit more precise. I mean, it's not usually precise, but like, for the functionality of a tabletop, I feel like it works better than meters. I don't know. Like, that's, maybe it's because of that that I find it slightly more confusing. I really don't know. Not for top-down RPG. Well, I mean, because in base D&D, it's like, okay, so your default range is 5 feet around you for most weapons, unless you have a very long weapon, or something that's enchanted, or something that's ranged, right? So, like, when I'm attacking people in, like, base game D&D, I'm like, okay, if they're within 5 feet of me, like, it just means you can, like, put everything into, like, okay, each square is 5 feet. Whereas I feel like it's slightly more clunky to have to map out an area in meters for a tabletop. Just because it's a smaller space, so you can, you can pan it out better, I feel like. And it's like, if you go with the default assumption, like, okay, everyone has like a 5-foot radius around them. Like, everyone fits in 5 feet. Whereas it's like, in meters, it's like, you can fit like 2 people in a meter beside each other, right? Yeah, I don't know. I find it slightly confusing just because, like, my brain is like, spell, 30 foot. Why 18 meters? Or like using Ice Knife as an example again. Like, so Ice Knife, in base game D&D, mostly the same in Baldur's Gate 3, but, some slight differences. But, like, the wording in it for 5e is like, oh, you hit the enemy you aim at, you do that damage, and then you get, like, an extra burst of ice that hits every enemy within 5 feet of that. Get that, but the system calculations are done for you already. Also, meters are represented better on game screens since they're visual. No. No, I'm usually fine with it, for most games. It's literally purely because I'm so used to D&D being in feet and blocking everything out by 5 feet, squares for D&D. That's, it just can, it threw me off. It threw me off so hard when I noticed it. I'm gonna wait for the break to end because, again, didn't tell me. Why is it not telling me anymore? I don't know what the fuck that noise I just made was. Thank God most people could not hear that. The whole time to ad breaks stopped me from hearing it. Hi, welcome back. That should be the ads over, hopefully. Wow, I really love... I don't know what the hell is happening, because last stream, Twitch was real good at, like, warning me a full, like, minute before that an ad break was gonna happen, and this stream is just not warning me. It's just doing it. I'm like, dude, I'm not paying that much attention to the clock. Holy shit. Yeah, I don't know how much you heard of me saying that. What I was saying. Yeah, it's just because I'm so used to the way that D&D, bases everything out. Well, like, I find it kind of interesting that they kept, like, each turn is 6 seconds. Because, like, like, it's not super noticeable, like, in the game itself, but, like, if you're in turn-based mode, you're in turn-based mode when you're not in combat, like, it tells you the first time you do, like, oh, it breaks it down into 6-second chunks so you can take more precise action. And it's like, okay, so you're keeping that part? You're keeping that weird number? I mean, like, I like the 6-second chunks. I think it's very recognizable, but it's just like, huh? You're keeping that, but you're not keeping it in feet? I don't know. It's just interesting to me. But I mean, and obviously it shows you, like, your range, by default, when you're actually doing stuff. You're sounding so American right now. I'm not even American! And I take personal offense to that. I am personally offended by that. Hi, Grilson! Yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, I don't know. I feel like for D&D purposes, because, like, frankly, the game is D&D. I don't know, I feel like it's most recognizable to have it in feet. Like, I don't even use feet in my day-to-day life, technically. But it's just, like, I don't know. I feel like that's just kind of the most established thing with D&D. It's like, everyone's very used to that. I just find it an interesting choice. And I mean, what's this about feet? Talking about Baldur's Gate 3, because they have all, like, the ranges and stuff worth in meters instead of feet, like in, actual D&D. And it threw me the fuck off when I started playing it. Yes, units, not the body part. Very important distinction. I hope I don't come back next stream and see Stars and Stripes everywhere. God, fuck no. I never want to be compared to an American. I hate that. Like, at least, like, go up a country. Come on now. At least that would be more accurate. Speaking of, like, I was actually, I was doing a whole... I'm just now imagining Shadow turning it into Clown Piece next stream. Oh god, what happened? What? Yeah, I was doing a bunch of applications for, like, a load of different stuff, yesterday. And so, like, I have, like, this issue when it comes to job applications, right? Where... Because there's a lot of animation industry stuff in Canada, right? So I have this issue that, when I'm applying for jobs that are based in Canada, even if they're remote, they always ask you, like, hey, do you have the legal right to work in this country? And I cannot simply answer that with a yes or no. Because I'm in the very awkward position of so, right. Some of you may realize, like, my accent does not sound particularly Scottish, right? And that is because my mom grew up in Canada and then came over here. So by right, I am legally entitled to be a Canadian citizen because my mom is Canadian, right? I should already technically be considered a Canadian citizen. I should already technically have the right to work in Canada. Here's where the difficulty comes in. I do not have a certificate of citizenship for being a Canadian citizen, which means even though legally I would be considered a Canadian citizen, I cannot legally prove it. And it costs like $75 like Canadian dollars to get that, and it's like a whole process that could take it like a year. And so I was looking at it, I was like, I should like really probably do this like sooner rather than later. No one's gonna ask you for it. Well, no, they kind of are though. If I'm working remotely in a country that needs me to have the right to work, because it's literally just like, because I don't currently live there, I would have to prove that. How much is that in Norwegian kroner? I could not tell you. I don't even know what it is in British pounds. I didn't bother to convert it at all. I was like, okay. Okay, that's one thing to worry about, but the most annoying thing, okay, so when I was looking at it, it was like, okay, so they have either paper applications or online applications. And like to check which one you had to do, you had to go through like a whole list of things. And the one question that makes it so that I have to do a paper application. Why? I don't know. But because my mom was born before certain dates, I have to do a paper application to get a certificate of citizenship that could take 10 months to get if I didn't ask them to fast track it because I needed it for work. Like, if I actually, like, manage to land a job that's within this country and I need it to prove that I have the right to work, like, I can ask them to fast track it if I were to do it, right? But, like, as it stands, like, right now, currently, I don't need that necessarily. It's like, you already want me to do an application that's probably that might take, like, 10 months for you to do, especially because, like, of the current natural disasters going on in Canada. You're asking me to fill out this application that has the ability to be done online, but because my mom is born before a certain date, I have to do it on paper and manually send that. What? That's so fucking stupid. What the fuck? Just build a time machine. God, I wish. This is like, It's like, I haven't done that yet. It was something I was looking into, because my mom didn't know what the process was. All she knew was, like, I confirmed with her, like, I was talking to her about it, just being like, yeah, I always have this issue when I'm filling out job applications that are from Canada, because, like, I should technically have the right to work there, but I can't legally prove it, so I don't know what to put down. And, like, as far as I'm aware, I don't have a certificate of citizenship. And she was like, no, you do not. So I was like, great. So this is something I have to work out now. And I don't own a printer. This is the main issue. I do not own a fucking printer. So it's like, I either have to go to the library to fill out, like, however many fucking documents I need, or I need to ask my parents to do it for me. Or I need to, like, haul my ass all the way to London to go to the fucking, Canadian government embassy there. Because they have one in Edinburgh, but it doesn't handle citizenship shit. Because of course it doesn't. Why would it? So, yeah, that's been a discovery. Although, on one hand, it was interesting to find out that, like, I technically should already have citizenship, like, by birthright. Like, I didn't know that. I thought I would actually have to apply for it. But no, it's like, no, I should already have it. I just have to send an application to get legal proof of it. Which is, like, a different kind of annoying. But clearly I got mixed up. I mean, my mom also didn't know how it worked, so... Like, I was kind of going off of what she had, like, mentioned about it. But now I'm finding out, like, oh, no, I should already technically have this. It's just that I can't legally prove it, is the case. Which is slightly awkward. I mean, I'm sure if I got a job with one of these places, I probably could explain that and they probably wouldn't be mad. I mean, they wouldn't have to sponsor me for a visa at least. It's just like, hey, I need you to like, I need you to like wait for a bit while I get this sorted, which is a different kind of pain in the ass. That's a major if though. But yeah, bureaucracy. Okay. Yeah, sure would have been nice if my mom had at least like looked into getting it sorted when I was still a kid, but no, now I have to do it. And it's usually the bigger the company, the more strict they are. That is true. I mean, it depends. Like, I feel like, on the whole, it's less of a pain for them than having to sponsor me for a visa would be, right? Because that's its own, like, can of worms. Which is why a lot of these places ask if you already have a legal right to work there. And it's literally just the proof that I can. Because, like, I should legally have the right to work a Canadian job, like, even without having to move there. Like, if it's remote. Like, I should legally be allowed to already, it's just I can't legally prove it. That's the issue. Because I don't even have a Canadian passport right now. That's its own thing that I need to sort out at some point. It was not a priority. Like, to get a Canadian passport, I would also need to get, like, a certificate of citizenship. It's such a pain. It's such a fucking nightmare. Just like, and everything is going to take so long, even once I do get started doing it, which is why I kinda want to do it, like, soon, just so I can get it out the fucking way. Yeah, so, very fun things. That was in the midst of me doing, like, a whole shit ton of other applications for other stuff as well. Why not just do it today? I don't own a printer. I can't. I physically cannot. I don't know if my local library has a printer either. I mean, I live, like, right next to a library. I've literally never been in it. But I also don't have a library card for it. I should also probably do it. They have to. I mean, they probably do. But yeah, I'd also have to get a library card there as well. I've literally never used it. But like, yeah, it's it's a whole pain in the ass. And then there's like, okay, mailing it too, which isn't as bad. Like, there's a post office on my street. But I feel like it's gonna be more painful than it sounds. I haven't looked at the documents yet. It's just like, okay, I'll do that at some point soon. I guess I'm like doing a bunch of a lot of very legally things recently. I don't know. Also, I had to apply for universal credit the other day just because, like, there's fucking no jobs right now. I mean, there's gonna be, but it's like, I can't wait for them to pop up right now. I have no money. So, like, I applied for that, for assistance temporarily. So I have a meeting for that at the start of September. Which is actually a while to wait, which is a pain in the ass. I probably should have done it sooner, but whatever. And, you know, standard job applications too. Yippee. Very fun. Meanwhile, my mom keeps getting on my ass about it. I'm like, I am literally doing everything I can right now. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. So, having so much fun. This is fine. Totally fine. Yeah, I've started applying for like normal local jobs, but it's like because we're still in the summer period as well. I expect next month there's gonna be a bunch of jobs popping up locally because my city, especially around where I live in it, is very student focused. Um, so because they go back at the end of September, like there's gonna be a whole bunch of job openings. Like logically speaking, like a lot of people are gonna be going back to uni, so they're gonna not be working anymore. So there should be a bunch of stuff opening up, but it's just like because now is not that time yet, there's still not much that I can find anyway. I started applying to the ones I did find that seemed doable. Like, okay, I I'm getting so fucking tired of filling out job applications. I've pretty much given up on cover letters at this point. Especially because like I was literally, so I talked to someone who's in the animation industry who does like hiring, and asked him for advice on writing cover letters, and he literally told me like, oh, don't worry about it, I don't even fucking read them. Or like I skim read them at best to look for portfolio links. I was like, why am I even fucking bothering then? If they're not reading it. God. I was like, that was pretty consistent with like everything I'd heard that like Francis Move Summit, where it was like some hiring guys at like other companies were talking about like oh yeah, like we'll give like maybe 30 seconds for each application. It's like, so you're not reading the cover letters. You're just not. Great. So I'm spending 30 minutes like writing this thing and you're not even gonna fucking read it? Why bother? Why would I do that? So, yeah. I've basically given up on like anything but the most bare bones of cover letters. It's like I'm not doing this. If you're not like, if you don't care, then I don't care. Oh, very fun. It'd be that was fun to find out. So I was very worried about it, and then I just got told like, don't worry about it, it's fine, whatever. Let's make sure the first paragraph is good, that's all. I don't think they even read that much. I mean, my first paragraph is literally just like, hi, I want to work with you. For this reason. It's just like, oh, fucking down. Like, no. Like, there's been some where I've put more effort in and it's like, wow, I'd actually, like, I have something to say. Then I'll write a cover letter, like, proper. But, like, most of the time it's just like, I just want work, dude. I'm sending, like, 20 applications out today. Like, I don't have the energy to do more of these. I was getting grumpy for some reason. Yeah, cover letters, fucking nightmare. I hate them. I don't understand why. It's just like, you have my CV already. Like, there's nothing I can tell you in a cover letter that's gonna cover the shit in my CV. Huh? Or like, that my CV doesn't cover anyway. I generally like, I mean, maybe it's just me, but it's like, I generally, I don't understand the point of cover letters. Cause it's like, everyone lies on them anyway, right? Like, isn't that, like, the main thing? Wait. Just like, Like, I don't know. I don't get it. No one wants to read them. No one wants to write them, so why are we doing it? Feels like a pain that's completely unnecessary. Especially if you're, like, gonna interview people. Yep, being modest is a terrible trait for I mean, it's not even that, though. It's like... I don't know. I don't... I genuinely don't understand. Because, like, the people hiring don't read it. Like, half the time. They don't care. Like, especially for, like, art stuff where it's, like, lie about everything that's not qualification for real. Right? But it's like, you don't care about it, I don't care about it, why are you making me do it? You know, sometimes I'll write a cover letter, most of the time I'm just like, fuck it. Like, half of these applications don't even ask for one. Half of them don't ask for a fucking cover letter, so why? Like, why? It's so stupid. I don't understand. Like, especially when it comes to art jobs where it's like, why would it matter what I write here? Like, I know you're not reading it. You're probably barely skimming my CV. Like, you only really care about my portfolio. So why are we doing this whole dance? Why are you expecting me to make a cover letter? I hate cover letters so much. I think they should be abolished. No, because higher ups want it. It's just stupid. It's just annoying. It's very annoying. And the job I have now, the boss who interviewed me just said he didn't read my CV and didn't intend to, just went completely off of vibes, and I respect it. Like, that's the thing. It's like, if it's a low-level job, like, they really don't care half the time, like, what's on there. If it's like a job that actually requires qualifications, then they'll care, but it's like, okay, the CV covers it. The CV covers my qualifications. And, like, especially for art, it's like, okay, well, you just want my portfolio. Half the time you hire people based off of just seeing their work online. Oh my god, Cello. Buddy, come on. It's like, half the time, you're hiring people just based off of what you see online. Why are you making me write a cover letter? I don't care. Like, I mean, there has been, like, a few studios I have actually done a cover letter for, like, properly. There's been one studio I've done it, like, 3 separate times in the past month. And that was because they reached out to me first. I was like, okay. So it's like, I want you guys to know I am legitimately interested, and also please hire me. Just like... I don't see the point half the time. Like, the only reason I even wrote this cover letters was just, like, so they knew it was me. Even though I was using the same details, so, like, they already had my details. I've been in contact with at least one of their hiring managers. I don't know if they have more. I'm gonna put Child to bed. He's being very annoying right now. There we go. Bird go bye-bye. Did a cover letter for a barista job that was about 300 words, never again, didn't even get back to say no, got left on red by fucking cost. No, yeah. I mean, whenever I was looking at, like, advice for writing cover letters, it was really just, like, write a few short paragraphs, just, like, cover these things, don't make it too long, because they're not gonna read it. It's just, like, I cover, like, the bare basics, I'm like, okay. If that. I'm gonna finish lighting this, and I'm gonna go take a break, because I need to go to the bathroom. I'm gonna finish lining this just because it's so close to being finished with the lines. I got so used to the bird noise I didn't even notice that. Oh, he was squawking like directly in my ear. I don't know how loud it is for you guys. I guess I'll have to check back on the stream later, but like he was loud. I could not hear myself, so I was like continuously raising my voice, trying to speak over him. It's about bedtime for him anyway, so he usually goes to bed about this time. When I'm actually like conscious to do it. Wasn't too bad. Home was just chilling. Okay, well he was like extremely loud for me. I mean his cage is directly next to me. So you guys probably only got like slight squawking. I had directly in my ear, pretty much. So, clearly more annoying for me than it was for you. Yeah, he's normally like when I stream during the day, he's fine, right? I mean, it's been a very long time since I've streamed during the daytime, but like he's normally fine during the day. It's just around this time because he's tired and getting crabby, literally like a fucking toddler. So he'll throw a tantrum like that until I put him to bed. He's not even going to sleep, he's just eating right now. But like he's no longer squawking. Those captions are not even slightly close cut out. They're not. I haven't checked my captions. I don't know how good it is, quite frankly. I am not in control of the automatic captions, unfortunately. By stress is an insight, Nick. What? It straight up doesn't know. I mean, me too, bitch, me too. Oh, cat bird. Any means doing this means you have. Damn, okay, that's really nonsensical. Perhaps I should look into a different captions thing then, if it's that fucking bad. Oh, I just realized I'm still on the soft eraser. That explains why I was having some trouble. Burn center for trousers. What is bro talking about? What's he on? I don't think even the captions know, to be honest. Yeah, that's not great. But I suppose real-time captions are only ever so good, huh? Might be better ones out there, but it'd probably be more annoying to try and get set up. I don't know OBS. There's like some OBS plugins that allow for it. I don't know. I was joking, but captions just said agree. Even the captions don't want to be here. Damn. Even they want to go. I was just dropping in to say hi again. Gotta hop off on some R6 with some friends. Have a good one. Okay. Have fun. Turn off my stabilization. These bushes. Why are you on 5? You should be on 6. Rude. These don't have to be that good. Barely even see them. Okay, that's that lined. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and you guys get to see my new break screen. Yippee! So I will see you guys in a bit. Okay? Behave. Behave. Okay? Here we go. I'm back. Hope you guys like my new stinger and be right back screen. There's also a new ending screen. You know, you'll see that at the end of the stream. No. Who would have thought? Yeah, I need to get the character references for these guys up so I can grab their colors. Because I do not have them on hand. Well, I have them on hand, just not in Clip Studio right now. There's Gossamer. There's Edelweiss. I need to put Edelweiss somewhere I can actually reach them better. Here we go. I'll go with Gossamer first. Because they're there. Oops. A thicker pen. There we go. I really need to get my voice more in shape for streaming again. Ah! I keep losing it. Come on. There we go. Kind of warm. Can I use that color for anything else? Let's crack that. Looks fine. Oh, that's not the right one. Okay. Oh, I can barely see that against the gray. I also missed that little bit of here. Of course I did. Hold on. Get that little line out of there. Mhm. Okay, I think that's all gossamer. Now, mix bubblegum over here. Edelweiss. Nope. Let's move that over. I don't get confused again. What is it? I guess this one. Oh, that's color that little bit of hair. Oops. There you go. Just this color. That's these two done, and then there's Bubba Dragon here, and the little daisy, whatever thing. Flower? Question mark? This little bit here. I have no idea how I'm gonna color this dragon, so bear with me real quick. I'll like figure that out. Yeah, I think that'll work. It looks like a little bird. I'll just fill the rest of this in manually. Be less annoying. I have kind of a stomachache and I don't know why. It's keeping like getting this like little pang. Not that bad, it's just annoying. I don't know why I'm getting it. Hungry? No, I ate not that long before stream. Like an hour before stream or so. If that. So I'm not hungry. It's just like these little pangs and then they go away. Not that bad, it's just like, okay. I don't know what you're trying to tell me, body. Oh, I also forgot those little teeny tiny strands of hair. But these two on a different layer. Well, these three, I guess. Including the dragon. But the foreground is a different layer, anyway. Oh shit, I just put the pink on its own. The previous layer, god damn it. I do this sometimes, and I don't know why. Very annoying, though. No, this is the layer that the pink should be on. I'm getting confused. There we go. That's all on its own layer. There we go. As it should be. Good, thank you. probably save that before anything happens. And time to shade. Yippee. So it's probably going to be kind of backlit. Once again, thanks Twitch for telling me about the ad breaks. Nice warning system you got there. So very functional. Hmm. I have no idea if this will end up looking any good. Anyways, I always struggle with backlit stuff, I feel like. I don't even think that looks good. I don't even like the color. Here's the full color patch, I best. Oh. I do. Could do the taking away method. Or rim light sort of thing. Yeah, I'm not sure like how that is. I'll just imagine there's a light at the front so I don't have to deal with it. At least that would be easier to get looking right. I can do backlighting, I promise, I just don't want to. I just don't think it looks quite right for this one. Ugh. Oh, I had to stretch there. Really bad. I'm to get pretty tired though. But I want to finish this off today. Even though I also started it today. But it feels nice when I finish a piece on stream. You know? And also I feel like it would be kind of awkward to pick up on another stream. Because then I'd have to set up like another thing to do afterwards. Because it would not take a full stream to finish. You ever just need to like stretch your face? Like all the muscles in your face are so tightened up. Just gotta like take your hand and stretch things. Stretch your cheeks and shit. Not like that. Oh god. Like your lips and stuff. I just get like a fucking massage or something. I swear. Ugh. I don't even know if there's any massage places where I live. I don't think there is. Even if there was, I can't really afford it, but it would be nice. Probably need this turn up here before I forget entirely. Huh. I've done that before, where I have actually legitimately forgotten to shave like an entire part. And I didn't realize for like 3 months. Like, not even joking, didn't notice it for 3 months. I just entirely forgot to shade part of something. Like, blatantly. That makes that look kind of vaguely concave. That's fine. Okay. I'm working something out there real quick. You see the maths floating in my brain? I feel like I should get that as like a live 2D item or something. All the little maths equations. Or a GIF item, maybe, actually? Probably that, more so. I don't think it would need to be a live 2D item, would it? Maybe that wasn't gonna work. The struggles on like AIDS, they're really dark. For some reason. I mean, I just need to like turn the tolerance down, but or well, change the tolerance to allow it to fill properly. But sometimes it's just very annoying about it. actually gonna just... I think this looks better. Here, I think that looks better, a bit more filled in at the side for Edelweiss. A bit harder for Gossamer though. Getting good. Gossamer's no fingies. I have to shade the dragon as well, of course. And the hay. Or down or whatever. I don't even know myself. It doesn't really matter. Once again, Twitch not warning me about ad breaks. Why? What the fuck is up with that? I need to little fill in the background. These little spots. Make it a little easier. This dude here just spawned in. Look at him. Lost in the flower? Question mark? Not really sauce, is it? Doesn't know what's going on at all. I think I've at least succeeded in making it look kinda new. He's new. I don't know who he is, but he's new. Brand new. Just got here. Doesn't know what's going on. Okay, wait. Inconsistency. Keep that red. Looks weird if I try to color claws differently, I think. Especially if it's just the one. Get that. character shaded. And I nearly just pulled a muscle in my neck trying to shift in my seat. That's great. Oh, separate layer. Or, well, not in the layer folder so I don't accidentally did that. I don't know what my phone just went off for, but okay. What was that? It's just stupid or whatever, okay. I don't even fucking use Quora. I just read like some of the dumb shit on there sometimes. Some of the questions are so fucking stupid that they're obviously like not real. Just like, yeah, okay. Sure. I'm gonna put texture on this. Monochrome. These won't work. Texture. Maybe this one. Just a little bit of texture, I think, goes a long way. Even if it's only very, very light. That's probably background noise colored a little bit. Just to make them less distracting. I think kinda a lot of the time. Oof. Calm that down a bit. I want to tint it, you know? Tint the scene a little orange. very, very light particles. I was like adding. I think that's pretty much done now. For, I think. Can't think of anything else I would want. I forgot to change this back. Do it on my font. Yeah, I think that's it. That's that done. Yeah, I'll keep that there. Right. Oh, thank you for coming. I suppose I should look to see if there's anyone to raid. No, there is not. No one I know is on. Okay, I'm just gonna end then. Thank you for coming. If you came for a little bit or a lot of it, either way, I appreciate it. I don't know if I'm gonna stream again this week. I don't know. Probably. Maybe? Question mark. Who knows? We'll see. Anyway, yeah. You guys will get to see my new ending screen. Yeah, ending screen. That'll be fun. And this art will go up in a few days. I don't know what day. It'll be in a few days, I think. At some point. Yeah. So yeah. See you guys later. Bye-bye.